Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you're doing well. It is January 10th, and this will be my first reading update video. And I recently completed The High Crusade. It's a science fiction novel by Paul Anderson. And I'll just give you a quick little plot synopsis. Begins in the distant future with a group of human explorers into interstellar space, and they're surprised to find that there are some humans already out there. And by way of explanation, they are given this kind of quasi medieval manuscript by one Brother Parvis. And insert your favorite flashback sound. We're treated to this manuscript and get the story behind this shocking development. So the year is 1345, and we're in Lincolnshire, England, where a rather uncouth but very cunning baron named Roger de Tourneville is gathering soldiers for King Edward's campaign against the French. This would be the Hundred-Year War. And that is going about as well as can be expected, but then things take a turn for the strange when a scout ship from the interstellar Wurscore Empire descends from the sky. And our Englishmen, of course, think this must be something demonic or a trick of the French at first, but they're brave and they approach. It turns out that the Wurscore representatives are there to evaluate Earth as a possible colonial expansion territory, I guess you could say. These Wurscorians, they aren't really in need of resources. They just like to have their elbow room. And they're used to ruling with the iron fist of fear, so they make with the ray guns and kill somebody, but the Englishmen don't take too kindly to that, so calling for the intercession of St. George and St. Michael and screaming a battle cry to King Edward, they attack these representatives and end up killing everybody on the ship save one, because these guys weren't used to resistance, apparently. But anyway, Sir Roger de Tourneville is a rather ambitious fellow and starts eyeing this ship and thinks, hey, maybe we can make use of this thing in the conquest of the French, and hey, maybe we can expand to seizing the Holy Land back from the infidels. King Edward would love all that, so he sets his trusty educator slash scribe, Brother Parvis, to work trying to communicate with the one surviving Wurscore representative, and they think they've learned enough about how the ship operates, and they decide it's large enough they can load basically the whole village on, bring all the comforts of home along. But they are double-crossed, and the surviving Wurscore representative, whose name is Branathar, by the way, locks on the autopilot and sends the Earthlings on an irreversible course to a colonial outpost of the Empire called, what was it? Thraxon. And he thinks it's certain that the humans will be overcome there, but I won't give too much away. Let's just say that these aliens aren't figuring with the medieval English mindset, and not only do they end up taking over this outpost planet, they end up making tremendous strides towards dominating the entire War Empire. So, yeah, that's the basic plot. And that's how our humans arrived in interstellar space much earlier than we might have expected. So, negatives about this, it's not the deepest science fiction. It's, interstellar distances are traversed in no time at all, like it's nothing. All the aliens are basically humanoid, that sort of thing, but it doesn't really matter because this is all about the entertainment value, and it has that in spades. This is a very funny novel, and the author gets a lot of the history. I'm not a historian, but I do enjoy reading about the medieval period, and he gets most of the history about right. He has some fun poking at some of the details of feudalism and medieval Catholicism, although he actually has a little bit of thought-provoking things that there could be worse alternatives out there in societies that might appear more advanced on the surface. He does get a couple little historical details wrong, like Brother Parvis is surprised to see that the earth is spherical, which that is a myth. Nobody who was educated during the Middle Ages actually believed that the earth was flat. Columbus was not some revolutionary in that area. Although he does think that some of those ancient Greek pagans had written about the earth being spherical, so although it's actually an oblate spheroid, I suppose. But anyway, I did laugh when he was worried about crashing into the crystalline spheres of the Ptolemaic cosmology. So, and at one point when Roger Tourneville is working on his conquest of the Rescorian Empire, he is turning some of their subject peoples against the central authority, and he takes inspiration from the Jacquerie, the peasant uprising in France. Well, that actually happened after 1345, but yeah, aside from little details like that, the history is really pretty well done. I enjoyed it, and like I said, there's even a little bit of thought-provoking material in there, like what over-reliance on technology and too much time spent living as an unquestioned dominant power can do to you when you're up against someone who's lived with rough conditions and has to be able to improvise. So, yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. Hope I'm doing some justice here. And I guess I should mention that I'm actually going to be doing a discussion with Kevin Toll regarding this book. I'll link the information about that below. If it sounds like something that'd be interesting to you, I recommend tuning into that. I assure you he'll be far more interesting in his presentation than I am. So, yeah, that was the High Crusade by Paul Anderson. Now, I am currently reading a nonfiction book called Personality by Daniel Nettle. And what it does, it presents a little bit of the history of personality psychology, specifically the development of the so-called 5-factor model. Let me see if I can remember what the 5 factors are. Extroversion, neuroticism, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and openness. Yeah. And then the author takes a look at these traits and considers their predictive value regarding human behavior over time. And I'm getting into the part of the book where he really breaks these traits down, looks at them individually, and he's really apparently going to dive into some of the neurology or potential neurology behind them, looking at actual brain anatomy and physiology that might underlie the variation in these traits. And he's also going to apparently speculate about some of the evolutionary pressures that might have resulted in variation in these traits, and guess as to whether, some of that variation will be maintained over time. So, yeah, I'm well into it. So far, so good. Yeah, don't know what else to say about that at this point. So last but not least, I'm just barely started on this one. It is, let's make sure I get the actual title right here. Yeah, it's just called The 100 Years' War by Desmond Seward. Yeah, it was actually kind of inspired by the High Crusade, but I'm a sucker for medieval history, and I enjoy reading about the 100 Years' War, and this is just a 1-volume survey that I had sitting around that I wanted to get read, and I'm just barely getting started. Don't have much to say yet, but I'm looking forward to digging in. So, with that, I'll bring this thing limping to an awkward close. Again, thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this. And my mind's going blank. Yeah. Again, I hope you're doing well. Have a nice weekend. I will talk to you later.